Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So I'm currently stood in southwest England in Torbay, and we're actually within the English Riviera Geopark. Now today is a super exciting day because we're actually doing a fossil excavation, and I thought I would bring you guys along to see it in action. Now within geoparks, excavating fossils isn't normal, so collecting is fully forbidden, and we just like you to observe the fossils and enjoy them, but leave them in their place unless they're identified as being scientifically valuable or really useful to kind of further academic research. So that's exactly what's happened here. So some very significant fossils have been discovered by no one else other than Dr. Kevin Page. So we're going to meet with him in a moment, who will explain a bit more about it all, because as you can see, we're in a coastal setting, and so if we allow them to sit here much longer, the sea will destroy them. So they're going straight to a museum where they'll be further curated and prepped and looked after so that people can visit them and understand why they're so significant, and also so perhaps further studies can be done on them. Lots of permissions and organisations had to get involved to make today happen, and so it's a team effort, group effort. Lots of different parties are coming together to actually get these fossils from in situ to the museum. So it's very exciting. We're going to see some pretty crazy stuff today. One being, how do we even get a massive fossil from the beach? What's involved in that? And one of it, instead of carrying it over boulders like you can see behind me, we're going to carry it up and over a cliff. Now we'll find out more about that soon, but first let's go meet with Kevin and find out a little bit more about how he made this discovery and what it means. Joined with the famous Kevin Page. Now you guys know Kevin quite well now, but we're back and we've got quite an exciting day planned, and Kevin's going to tell us a little bit more about how he made this discovery and a little bit about what it means. So take it away, Kevin.
Thank you. Well, I was here a couple of years ago doing a conservation survey. The rocks here are so important nationally; they're part of a site of special scientific interest. But of course, if you've got a protected site, you need to every few years check that everything's okay, that nothing has sort of been built on or eroded away or been stolen. So I was walking along here just down the coast, and I tripped over something which I thought was a bit of tree, a bit of log. And these rocks were laid down about 370 million years ago out at sea, so I thought this is a really strange. So I found this thing I thought was a tree. I mean, we analysed it afterwards and it turned out to be a very, very weird coral. But I was thinking about tree. So I came along the coast until I got to here, and I suddenly saw some more pieces, and I thought, those are trees. I mean, how did they get here, out at sea? And I found one and I found another, all embedded in the rock just over here. So our target of these days is to actually sort of recover these specimens and put them somewhere safe so they can be studied and not lost to the sea or any other causes. So, but it's that sort of thing. If you're not thinking about what you're looking for, then you can miss things, because people have walked over here for like literally centuries and never seen these fossils. I came along thinking tree, and I thought, oh, I found some more. So that's how I found them.
I love that you came along thinking tree and found a tree.
But yeah, exactly.
We'll show you in a bit more detail in a minute, but it's quite interesting. The texture on the trees could, at first glance, on the untrained eye, look like a coral. So
yeah.
Certain coral colonies have a similar pattern, but not quite the same, and we'll show you some examples so you can see how we know it's a tree. But it's very interesting that, you know, if you're thinking coral, you'll just presume they're all corals.
Exactly.
But it was just because you're thinking tree. That it was like, oh, actually.
Yeah.
And this is the first discovery of its kind here, isn't it?
It is. I don't think there's any other plant remains in the area of the global geopark. And so this is and it's one of the oldest evidence of trees and forests in Britain as well, so it's really quite special.
So we're now going to try and tackle the really difficult task of explaining the geology to you a little bit, and there's a lot going on here. So Kevin's going to take the reins on it and we're going to walk through a little bit of the sequence, is that right?
Yes.
Let's give it a go.
Okay.
So Kevin, where are we stood right now? What are we looking at?
Well, we're looking at the oldest rocks in this section here. They're cut off over there by a big fault. So what we're looking at here is typical Upper Devonian marine rocks, but not very shallow, moderate depth. So you've got red mud, you've got sort of probably silty patches, and just over there, that white mark, that's actually a coral. And that's preserved in the mineral calcite because the corals actually had a calcite skeleton. So it's just been filled in with limestone. So the corals look like that. There's also lots of specks around as well, little white dots, which are pieces of crinoid, which is like a starfish on a flexible stem. And the stem is like a stack of polar mints. So when they die, they just fall everywhere and then just sort of wash around in the sediment.
Almost like jigsaw pieces.
Yeah. So you've got lots of bits of crinoid, bits of coral, there's a few shells and things as well. So this is a perfectly normal marine environment. We've even got a layer down here of limestone where all the bits of crinoid have actually been concentrated. So it's just a perfectly normal marine environment. But then something starts to happen. And we have a grey band there. And we have another grey band there. And another grey band there. And these aren't normal sediments. These are actually volcanic ashes. So something's beginning to happen. This lovely peaceful sea is starting to be disturbed, and the ash is raining down.
So we've just followed along the sequence a little bit. So here is that final ash band that Kevin was just pointing at. So now what happens next, Kevin?
Well, this ash band is really nice. There's some little coarse texture in it, so that's some of the particles within it. And then we have this layer here, which is sort of mud and silt, but within it there's something completely different, like here and here. And these are the things, I mean, they look a bit like a coral. They have little pot marks, which will be the different corallites, part of the colony, but they're arranged in spirals, in rows, and they're not preserved in the mineral calcite, they're infilled with silt. So these are the things, I saw them and thought, that's plant, but they're not supposed to be here. And I looked, found one, and I found another, and found another one as well. These are really interesting. These are sort of like unique. This is a new find to this area, and they're a type of plant called a lycopod, which is a very primitive tree. They're related to modern club mosses, and each of these marks here would have had a spiky leaf coming out from it. So they're a bit like modern horsetails, a long stem with spiky leaves coming out of the side. And they're very primitive, but these were some of the earliest trees ever. These were they were up to 4 meters tall. Back in the end of the Silurian, the forests were about 4 centimeters tall, but these were 4 meters. But within a few tens of millions of years, in the Carboniferous, in the famous swamps which made the coal, their descendants had reached 30 meters. But these days, about 30 centimeters, it would be giant for a club moss. So this was really, really weird. I mean, what are they doing? All the marine fossils, the corals around, what are these doing out at sea? But we've got a few clues. There's a volcanic ash here. And we have this wonderful marine sequence, and then suddenly this coarse stuff comes in. And this represents a volcanic eruption. This is something which is, I believe, called a hyaloclasite. I'm not a volcanic specialist. We need someone to have a look at this. Well, this is what happens when a volcano erupts under the sea. The molten lava comes up. It's cooled by the seawater and it explodes. So you get a hail of small particles of ash and small particles of rock coming down. And I've seen rocks just like this, but only a few thousand years old, in Iceland, and I've seen them in the Azores. So I've seen modern versions of this, and it's got exactly the same texture. So we have a big volcanic eruption suddenly here. So we have ash bands, corals, plants, volcanic eruptions. There's some green streaky bits in here as well. And I'm pretty sure these are something called fiamme. It's from an Italian word for flame. And this is what you get in an ignimbrite, which is a glowing cloud eruption. These are one of these big destructive eruptions you get. The volcano explodes and the plume of ash and hot gases collapse down the sides. And it's like a big bulldozer. It just destroys areas. It happened to Mount St Helens, and it's what destroyed Pompeii. This glowing cloud eruption, which is like sort of 1,000 degrees centigrade or something like that. And the little lines in it are where particles of volcanic glass have been stretched out by the heat. So we have a situation here, we have marine deposits with volcanic deposits, and this cycle happens at least 3 more times over there. You go back to a nice quiet sea with corals, and then a big eruption, and then quiet sea and corals, and a big eruption. So there's a cycle here. So this helps us explain potentially how the plants got here. Plants have to grow somewhere. They need land. The interpretation of the rocks here is they're hundreds of kilometres, even 1,000 kilometres in the middle of an ocean. So how do you get land? And the obvious explanation here is a volcanic island. So we seem to have evidence of these primitive trees growing on a volcanic island, which might be the first time this association has been recognised anywhere. And over in that direction towards the east is a huge, big volcanic complex centred around the town of Totnes. Lots and lots of volcanic rocks. So that's probably where the volcanoes were. And this is the material being erupted here. And all the bits of plant are all orientated, they're all lined up, and they're pointing in the direction of volcanoes. So my theory on this is, someone could maybe prove me wrong, is that this is a tsunami deposit. There was a big explosion, a tsunami wave washed onto one of the islands, and when the wave receded, it washed all the plant bits out to sea and mixed them up with the corals, and that's why they're all aligned. Because they're long bits, and if there's a current, they'll point in the direction of the flow. So that's my theory. My theory is that we have volcanic islands here with some really primitive early forests growing, and then there's a tsunami of volcanic eruption, and the plants get swept into the sea, and that's how we've come to find them here. So I'm looking for someone to actually prove me wrong on this one, but it seems it's what fits the facts, and this is one of the exciting things about geology. You draw together all these bits of evidence and you can come up with these hypotheses which you can then test. So now I need to look at the nature of the rocks and the context to see whether my hypothesis is actually true. But it's the best one I have at the moment.
So I'm joined now with Melanie Border, who is the coordinator of the English Riviera Geopark. So thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome.
So it's quite an exciting day and we're busy on the beach. So could you give us a little to start with actually, let's have an overview of the Geopark itself and a bit of the history.
Yeah.
And then we'll get into what's going on behind us.
Okay, so we have the remarkable designation of UNESCO Global Geopark for this area. We're one of just 213 areas around the world that are recognised by UNESCO, primarily for our internationally significant geology, but it's also how that geology has influenced our environment, our history, our heritage, all the way from deep time right through to today and our communities that live here at this point. So our internationally significant geology is based and starts around 400 million years ago with the marine Devonian limestones, and then we have evidence of the Variscan orogeny, so that mountain building period. Then as we shifted northwards through the Permian, and we have a lot of desert red sandstones and breccias, but then more into the history of early man with the caves that formed in the limestones and the 3 species that were found at Kent's Cavern. So we have this huge story through time to share with people and then celebrate it.
This is a fossil excavation, but in terms of the fossil collecting code for anyone watching, what should they follow? Right,
so we have a very set and finite fossil resource here within the English Riviera UNESCO Global Geopark. So we also have one of the most densely populated amount of designated sites and protected sites through SSI, county geological site, etc. And for all of those sites and the area, the geopark as a whole, it's a no hammering area. It's no collection because of the importance and finite nature of our geology here. We, of course, like today, have got all of the permissions in place. We've been through to Natural England. We've got everything signed off. It's fully recorded to make sure that we're doing this properly and accurately, with a huge wealth and a working group that's been working towards this point today where we're finally excavating. So we've had academics down here. We've had all sorts of discussions about the best option for this particular fossil, and ultimately, because it was at risk of erosion from the sea, from storms, we've decided the best thing we can do is to recover it, to make sure it's not lost from our geological record, because it's so exciting to have something new to look at.
Yeah, and it's definitely a team effort, that's for sure. And these things don't happen overnight.
Yeah.
So it's amazing that it's all come together.
I mean, I think it's important to say for people, we do encourage everyone to come and explore. You know, come and enjoy what's here. Mm-hmm. Look for fossils by all means, take photographs, learn from it. We've got lots of information on our website. There's so many sites you can explore and have a wonderful time. Even just looking at the pebbles on the beach. Look for those patterns and you might actually find a pebble with some coral fossil that's so old.
Should we go check out what they're doing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Look at the outcrop here. You can see that there's lots and lots of fragments dotted all over the place. So most of these fragments aren't more than 10 centimetres long, but they could continue a lot further beneath the surface. So we've got this silty mudstone and the sea has kind of etched away the surface to reveal some of these fragments, but there could be lots more beneath the surface. All these fragments could extend further kind of underneath that layer. So once these pieces go to the museum, they'll be further prepped and curated, and it'll be really interesting to see just how much more can be revealed from this outcrop. So it's going to be exciting to kind of follow along with and actually see the final result. But these are pieces of roots and bark of primitive trees. You can see those pock marks all over the surface. So they're really kind of detailed. And even though the sea has kind of etched away and eroded them, a lot of them still have that detail on the surface. So we did get to them in time. Whereas, you know, a few of them, it's starting to fade, but it's still there, which is the main thing. So Kevin did the job of kind of finding them, and then we got this excavation planned in kind of the right time frame to save these fossils. We are starting to crack through the big surface as Kevin figuring out how a camera works. And so this rock was kind of, some parts were simpler to hammer and chisel, and some parts were a lot harder. So you can see here some fracture lines that we're trying to follow the natural fracturing of these rocks, but these upper bits had so much cleavage and were so crystallized that it was just rock solid. So, you know, we're there with chisels and sledgehammers and we would all take it in turns. So, you know, we had lots of helpers and we would kind of just have a go and hope for the best. And you can always tell when you're hammering and chiseling, there's a sound change in the rock, so you know when it's starting to give. But this was one tough rock, and luckily it wasn't coming out in fragments. So there were some smaller pieces, but you can see here, like, it is solid. You know, this is a large rock and it is just one big lump, which is much better for the fossil because we're not having to do a 6 billion piece jigsaw. However, a lot more kind of hard labour for those of us involved in the excavation, but such good fun. I mean, you don't need a rage room when you are hammering and chiselling an outcrop like this. Like, you can just put all your might into it and the rock doesn't even budge, and you then can't even move the chisel. It's just stuck. So here I am now trying out the larger chisel. So this one was definitely the better choice. So this can do quite some damage. So we have kind of different sized chisels to kind of slowly work out how the rock is behaving. So it's all trial and error, and you kind of just have to start hitting a rock with the chisel, and you always want to go way kind of nowhere near the fossil. So you want to go either beside it or beneath it so that you're trying to get the rock to fracture in a nice big chunk. And this is me being not very smart and trying to lift it and nearly falling, but luckily I managed to balance. And so much better idea is to wedge 2 chisels in and use it like a lever. But I think this sort of weight rock is better left to slightly stronger hands. So you can see here it's just a case of levering it out, and then once it's loose, it's good to go. And we then had a team of people kind of once Kevin labels it and keeps everything organised, because you want to know the way up of the rock and also what piece is what. So we had one person working out kind of where it fits on the jigsaw of the outcrop, so that everything was kind of monitored and kept track of, and then it was ready to go. And so that's then put to one side, ready to be transported, and the process begins again. So it was great to have so many people helping, because it meant, different people had different roles and we could just really crack through. And so just bit by bit, we slowly made our way through this whole outcrop. And here Kevin and I are trying to work out, how do we even go about getting these next fossils out? Because this upper bit was so hard to chisel. And you can see at Kevin's angle, you can't even get the chisel in the gap. So it was a really awkward kind of slanted outcrop. So you're at the mercy of the rocks and you've just got to kind of work with them, but it can be quite exhausting, but it is really, really good fun. So you can see here, I'm literally tapping the rock and it just crumbles at the tip of the chisel. So it's so hard, it just is, it's not like fracturing further into the rock, it's just kind of crumbling at the end of the chisel. So here Kevin has made some progress, so you can see this piece is ready to lift up. So this has come off as quite a nice large block here. You can see this one's actually a lot bigger than you think, because it's got the other part attached to it as well. So the hammering and the chiseling is challenge number 1. And now challenge number 2 is actually getting these large blocks from this outcrop up and over the cliff. Now to do this, we needed our partners from Highline, who sent down a duffel bag on a pulley system using ropes. So you can see here the white bag with the climber. Now this duffel bag, maybe it's one duffel bag, or sometimes we would double them up as well for some of the heavier specimens, would hold those heavy blocks that are fragile but also not too fragile. So they're fairly robust, but they're not robust enough to bounce up and down the cliff face. So they can't just be dragged up the cliff. So some very clever physics and engineering was needed to kind of counter the weight of the fossil so that it never kind of was dragged up the cliff. So you can see here, very much a team effort and also a lot of work. So these are heavy fossils, and so it takes, about 5 people on a rope to counter the weight of the fossil so that it doesn't drag on the cliff surface. So there was a lot of kind of clever rope work to ensure the safe ascent of this fossil, and we had to do this about 10 times because there wasn't just one fossil to come out, it came out in each of those fragments. So this pulley system was just going up and down with each fossil that got excavated. So everyone had a role to play, and it was really amazing to see everyone kind of work together to get all these fossils up to the top of the cliff. And so you can see here the relief as that fossil has now made it. And then the final place for these fossils, once they kind of all made it to the top, we needed to put them in the van. So they were all laid out on the grass, and you can see them all here. So these are all the larger blocks. So all the more fragile pieces or smaller bits were wrapped up and labelled separately. And then these larger blocks were kind of stacked together and wrapped as one because they are a bit more sturdy. And so these are all on their way to the Torquay Museum, where they're going to live for the foreseeable future, and they'll undergo quite a lot of prep work and also some scientific studies in the future as well. So the main thing is they are now safe from further destruction, and we can actually analyse the science from them and get some more kind of research about why they are there, and students can study them, and it'll be really interesting to see the kind of studies that come from them and what they can tell us about the Devonian period 377 million years ago. It's a really amazing kind of puzzle piece, and if Kevin hadn't spotted that they were trees and not corals, then they would have been destroyed by the waves, and who knows if more would have been found. So it's really an amazing discovery, but also an amazing effort to make sure that these are preserved and not destroyed. And it's nice to see them going into the museum here, which is their home now. So you can see some of the shelves here, you can see the stack of the larger pieces here. just waiting to be revealed. So you can see them kind of poking out the layers there. So it's going to be really interesting to see what's actually hiding beneath that surface. And I'm looking forward to seeing kind of what result after some professional prep work, because the sea is great, but it doesn't always do the best job at revealing fossils. And so here's the official form. So Kevin is just filling in kind of the inventory form so that they're official. They have been entered into the museum, and that's where they will safely live. So I thought now I would try and briefly explain how we know the age of these rocks, because it's a very complicated procedure, but also very interesting. So you may remember hearing Kevin and myself say 377 million years old. Now, how on earth do we know that these rocks in question are 377 million years old? Well, there's a method that's used in this case called zircon dating. So this is a form of radiometric dating, and it's done by measuring the ratio of uranium to lead within the zircon crystals. So one way to think about it is a zircon mineral grain forms when it cools from its liquid temperature to solid. So think about lava or something like this. So it's liquid, then it goes to a solid rock, and this, you can almost imagine it as a clock being set to 0 at this point. So this is the age we get from doing this procedure, because we can work out from that point to the current day how much time has passed. So the first thing you have to do is find the rocks, so the outcrop that you want to date. Then you want to sample quite a large portion, so around 20 kilograms or so of material, because this material isn't all datable. It has to be kind of broken down and crumbled into a powder. Then that powder needs to be separated, so doing kind of density and magnetic separation to actually kind of whittle it down a little bit more. So you'll end up with kind of a very small amount of powder, maybe 100 grams. Then you want to isolate again the denser material. So this is done using a heavy liquid because zircon has a high density, so it sinks. Then you'll be left with kind of a few grams of zircon. And then this is the material that will get passed through a magnetic field to remove any further grains that might have iron in but are also quite dense. Then you're remained with just the zircon. You then will do a microscopic analysis. So this occurs to kind of manually separate the best zircon crystals, because you want around 40 of them to kind of get a fair result. These then go under an electron microscope, revealing the inner structure of each kind of crystal. Now, any of the damaged ones will get discarded, and only the perfect ones are then used. They will then be bathed in a hydrofluoric acid. They'll be bathed and baked for about 3 days until fully dissolved. So we've now got a liquid form that has silicon in, zirconium in, uranium and lead. So now you want to get rid of anything else apart from uranium and lead. So to do this, they use resin and acid washes to remove anything else apart from the uranium and lead, and you'll be left with a tiny, tiny little droplet. So this little droplet is known as the analyte. And after this, you can then do isotope dilution. And this is where you actually add lead-205 to the analyte, and then do thermal ionization, where you convert the liquid to a gas so that it's then ready to pass through the mass spectrometer, which will actually give you the results needed as they pass the information through various equations to give you an age for the rock. Now, this age for the rock is accurate, give or take, but as you can see, there are many, many steps, and it's a very complex process and needs to be done by very capable hands, but it's very interesting nonetheless. That's all I got for you guys today. I really hope you've enjoyed today's video. Please like and subscribe if you did. And if you've got any wacky theories about what could have gone on here, or you agree or disagree with us, please let me know in the comments. We would love to kind of start a discussion about this, because it's so interesting and it was just so fun to be a part of. So I hope you guys have enjoyed seeing it as well. But that's all I got for you today, so hopefully I'll see you next time. But thank you so much for watching.